Spotlight. And this is April 24th, 2025. The time is 8:22 p.m. Central Time. And I'm going to jump right into it because I would really like to keep these down to 20 minutes max. But we'll see how it goes. By the way, we have been getting tremendous views. YouTube's still a little low, but the Facebook, I'm doing Facebook Live at the same time. We've been getting a couple thousand hits in a 24-hour period. That's pretty impressive. And so there is some interest here. Now, we got to get the YouTube channel beefed up. We got to get this thing going. And now over a few weeks, the YouTube, some of them do get quite a few views, but it takes some time. All right, so I want you, if you have a Bible, I want you to go to Exodus chapter 3. And tonight we're going to continue our series about church apostasy. We're not necessarily numbering them. We had 3 of them numbered, 1, 2, and 3. And then we've done some more. And you can just go to YouTube and click on the live button on my channel, and you'll see all the live ones. And you'll see the thumbnails there. And church apostasy, you'll see one about the pastors, the problem and the solution, and a few others there. They're all kind of together in this thing. Why are churches going into apostasy? It's very simple, very simple. Because the pastor. And I love pastors, and I'm not trying to beat up on pastors. I'm trying to edify our pastors. I'm trying to get our pastors to understand what their job is, that they got to stand up. They've got to be the shepherd of the flock. And if they're not, that flock is going to stray. And you, my friend, as I talked about last night, our preacher, you're going to be held accountable as he who must give an account. Hebrews 13:17. We looked at that last night. I'm as serious as I can be about this. God is serious about this. The calling of God is no little thing. And I realize we have a lot of men in the ministry that I'm convinced we have a lot of men in our pulpits who are not called. They have a desire. They got in the ministry. Maybe they went to Bible college, because everybody else was. And there's a lot of men in our pulpits that are not called. Now, I don't know who is and who isn't. I'm just saying. Well, I want you to take your Bible, if you have one, Exodus chapter 3. And if you don't have one, that's okay. I'm going to read some stuff here. The man in the Bible, the closest thing to understanding a pastor is the man Moses. And if you don't think that he and others like David and Saul and others are types of New Testament pastors, then you've been brainwashed, friend. And I've got some preacher buddies that are fighting this. They believe that David and Moses and that they're not types of a new. What they've told me is that they're not New Testament pastors. You can't use illustrations from them. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. The Bible says that the things in the Bible are for our admonition and for our learning. The Old Testament things are given for our learning and for our admonition. And I read you in a prior show, I showed you Acts chapter 7, verses, I believe it's verse 37, 38, 39, somewhere in there, the church in the wilderness. I showed you, talked about 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 4. These are important passages, taking us back to the Old Testament, specifically to the children of Israel under Moses. Calls it a church, talks about they're baptized of Moses in the sea. Now, if those aren't types and figures of a New Testament pastor, then I don't know what I'm talking about. Now, some of you think I don't, but I promise you, you and I maybe will stand together in heaven next to each other, and you can apologize then, because I'm right about this. And if you're denying this, you got a beef with God, because some of you has got some beliefs about pastors that aren't biblical. And you will not let anybody use Old Testament examples because it blows apart your faulty belief system about New Testament pastors. And we won't go back into some of that, but this is important stuff. All right, so Moses is probably the best example in the entire Bible of the work and life of a New Testament pastor. And I'm going to show you the calling of Moses. And I'm going to show you that there's some things about the call of Moses that you and I and us guys today need to get a hold of. And so Exodus chapter 3. Preachers Called by Fire is the title. So I want to begin in verse 1 here. But let me first make a couple statements. A couple of warnings here. Are you listening? Number one, preacher, quit trying to preach young men down the aisle to surrender to the ministry. Let me say that again, because some of you just fell off your chair. Probably some of the same guys that think Moses is not a type of a New Testament pastor. Probably some of those guys that are watching just fell off your chair, and maybe you're shaking your fist at Dan Goodwin. Brother Goodwin, what are you talking about? Quit preaching at young boys, young men. Quit trying to get them to surrender to the ministry. Oh my goodness, I've just made some people mad, haven't I? Holy cow! The phone lines are going to be ringing tonight. Preachers are going to be calling their buddies. You won't believe what Brother Goodwin said tonight. That guy's nuts. Quit trying to preach young men into the ministry. Oh, I know it looks good. We had 4 men called to preach last night. Bless God. You get on your phone. Yeah, we had 3 saved, couple baptisms, and 2 young men came and surrendered to the ministry. And now, if 2 men came of their own will and told you they believe God's called them, I'm glad. Let me say it again, so you understood what I said. And we got a prayer request here, but hang on a second. Quit trying to encourage and push young men to get up from the seat, come down forward, and surrender to being a pastor or being in the ministry. It ain't your job. That's the Holy Ghost job. Did somebody twist Moses' arms and say, Moses, you need to get in God's service and free the children of Israel? No. In fact, he spent 40 years on the backside of the desert doing his own thing. And then what we're going to read tonight is where God gets a hold of Moses. And I've got some points here I'm going to share with you that I think will help you. You might want to get a piece of paper, a notebook. Of course, you can watch these again later, I suppose. We got Miss Jonah from the Philippines, and Miss Jonah married my buddy over there in the Philippines, and he's called to preach. And we've got I don't know who we got on YouTube here. Let's just see. We got this one prayer request. Hey, Brother John. And I saw both of your orders, Brother John, and I'm going to add that other book, so I'll ship those tomorrow. I'm glad I didn't ship today because you ordered another book, and I'll get them all together. There's a prayer request here, Brother Dan. Can you please say a quick prayer for Russell that his blood pressure comes down. I drank a sports drink, and I didn't know my blood pressure shot up and won't go down. And I'm not sure who that is. All right, pray for Russell. His blood pressure has gone crazy, so pray for him. And also pray for a brother, assistant pastor named Chad, who's in a church in Carbondale, Illinois. He got into some sort of an accident at work. He's got burns to his face and some other, I think his hands, I'm not sure, but I don't know what happened yet, but it's pretty serious. He was flighted somewhere. So pray for Chad, a fine young man. In fact, the church that I did some YouTube videos, or was it Facebook? Might have been Facebook. I don't remember, but anyway, I did some videos from the Easter service of the singing. That's the church. In fact, he is the young man in the group. It's on my Facebook page. He's the young man with all the girls singing. And so pray for Chad. He's the pastor's son on staff there at the church. Fine young man. And okay, let me give you some things here, because we're already at the 10-minute mark, and we haven't got into this yet. I don't know if I'm capable of a 20-minute message. I joke, I say I can't give my introduction in 20 minutes. But let's give you some things about this call from the preachers called by fire. Exodus chapter 3. I love this story. I love the story of Moses. Let me say it again. There is no greater type and figure in the entire Bible of a New Testament pastor than Moses. Acts chapter 7 and 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 4 certainly make that obvious. So you better get this right. Some of you better learn how to study. Some of you better learn what the Old Testament's all about. Everything in the Old Testament is light is shined on it in the New Testament. Do you understand in Acts chapter 2 when Peter preached on Pentecost? You understand there was no New Testament, there was no book of Matthew, there was no book of Acts, no Timothy. You understand that Peter preached the Old Testament? You understand Acts chapter 7, what Stephen preached? He didn't have a New Testament. Everything you need is in the Old Testament. It's just encased in clouds and shadows. And, it's there. Don't ever think the Old Testament's not important. It is vitally important to your understanding of the New Testament. Let me give you some things here. Number one, well, I already said it. Preachers, quit trying to preach young men into the ministry. Now, I don't mean not to preach about being in the ministry and God's call and all that. Sure. But quit trying to preach a guy down the aisle to surrender. You may be preaching a guy down and getting his emotions, or maybe a guilt trip that he surrenders and he's not called. And we don't need that. And he doesn't need that. And you don't need that. My goodness. Let me say this. Find or seek men who have been to the fiery bush. Seek young men who've been to the mountaintop and seen the fire and felt the fire. That's who I would be encouraging. But you better make sure that they know God's called them. Let me tell you something. When you're laying on your back in the ministry and everything's a mess and you wish you was dead and troubles have come, church splits, fights, you got one thing to hang on to, my friend, and I've been there. One thing to hang on to. And Brother Remy, I think he's watching tonight, he's been there several times too. You got one thing to hold on to. I've been called. God called me to this church. God called me to this ministry. You're going to need that, my friend, to hang on to when things get bad. Not if things get bad, when things get bad, because they will get bad. You're dealing with people. You're dealing with power struggles and all kinds of stuff. You better have thick skin. You better walk with God. That's what the ministry is. Part of it is God has called you to spend time with him, special time with him. Now, well, we got, Brother Steve Remy is here. He's on the Facebook page, and I know quite a bit of the stories from Brother Remy. He's been through it. And, well, let me give you some things in Exodus here. If you got a pen and a pad of paper, you may want to jot a few things down or just listen. You can always watch these again. Remember, now we're on Prophecy Spotlight YouTube live, and we're on Prophecy Spotlight Facebook. We're running both here. You can listen to either one of them. You can go back later. Now, the Facebook one, I think they've changed it. I think it only stays for 30 days and it's deleted. So keep that in mind. The YouTube, I've always felt, is better quality, and it's easier to find, and it stays there forever, unless you get bumped off YouTube, right? Here it is. Remember, Moses spends 40 years in Egypt thinking he's somebody. He thinks, in fact, he thinks he's the son of the Pharaoh. And he's going to spend 40 years after he's exited out of Egypt. He's going to spend 40 years on the backside of a desert. He's going to marry a lady. He's going to have some couple of children. And Gershom or something like that. I forget all the names, but he's going to have some kids. And he's going to be on the backside of it 40 years. So that's 80 years. So the next 40 years, he's realizing that he's nobody. He's going to spend the final 40 years. He lived to be 120 before God took him up on the mountain and took him out. And God hides his body. There's some things about Satan contending over the body of Moses in the book of Jude that's interesting. He spends that final 40 years realizing God is somebody. And now what happened to Moses in that 80th year? Something changed in his life. I'll tell you what. God called him by fire. Now, if I have a chance, I'll share some of my calling with you, but I don't know if we'll have time. But verse 1, we're in Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses kept the flock. This is during the second 40 years of his life. In fact, this is near the end of the 40 years. Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb, Mount Horeb. I personally believe Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb are the same place, but that's for another day. Number 2, verse 2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. God used a burning bush to get the attention of a man that he was going to call to a great task, to the ministry. And by the way, preacher, if you're called of God, your calling is just as important as Moses' calling. And just as important. And you ought to have a vivid understanding of your calling, just like Moses had a very vivid understanding of his calling. Now, Moses heard God speaking to him verbally, maybe in his head, we're not sure. But you and I didn't get that. But we have this. Moses didn't have this. Moses hadn't written it yet. And Moses said, I will turn aside, verse 3, and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw, verse 4, that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses, and he said, here am I. Let me give you a few points and we'll read a little more here. Number 1, the call. If you have experienced the call of God in your life, there was a time in your life when a fire began to burn in your soul. I can testify personally to this. Personally. I remember having sermon ideas and things. I remember, having the desire to preach to people. And this was in Wiscasset, Boothbay Harbor, Maine is where I had an apartment. I had been in the Navy for 4 years, and I was now working at the Bath Iron Works shipyard. And I got in a church in Wiscasset, Maine. And Brother Steve Reamy knows exactly what I'm talking about. He knows the church. And Brother Reamy wasn't there yet, I don't think, or no, that was later. Okay, but this is when I'm 20. I'm 23 years old, I guess, 24. Let's see, 18, I got out in 20. I'm 22 years old. I'm a young man. I've been saved for about a year. I get in a good old-fashioned Bible-believing King James church. And God is going to be getting my attention there. Mainly through three men who came through that church as an evangelist. Three different men really influenced my life to turn to the call to preach. And Russell, yes, Russell, I saw that, and we mentioned that. We're praying for you, Russell. He's writing over on here on Facebook now about the prayer request. So number one, in verse 2 of Exodus 3, in Moses' life, a fire began to burn, and he sees it. I remember that fire burning in my soul. I didn't understand that I was called to preach yet, but there was a fire burning. I was starting to feel like I wanted to know God and I wanted to do something. Number 2, in verse 3, Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight. So the fire comes first. There's a fire. Number 2, you begin to seek the presence of this fire. Moses saw the fire. Verse 3, I will now turn aside and see this great sight. So Moses sees the fire, the burning bush, and he says, I need to get close to that. I need to experience this. This is the call of God now. There's a fire involved. The fire starts to burn. And as the fire begins to burn, you begin to seek God's presence in that fire. In the same verse 3, Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. Number 3 is this. Not only do you begin to seek the presence coming from that fire that's burning in you, that you believe is from God, you begin to seek it. Number 3, you begin the process of turning from worldly things, not necessarily sinful things, although that may happen too. You begin to be not as interested in worldly things as you are in being involved with the things of God. Do you understand that? Shouldn't be about when Elisha was called. You know what he did? He burned the plow. He was plowing a field. God called him. A preacher had spoken, and the call of God came upon him. He burned the plow. Why? Because he was never coming back to that plow. He's going on an adventure. And, you begin, so a fire begins to burn in your soul. That can happen while you're hearing your pastor preach, or an evangelist, or a missionary, or a sermon online. Something begins to burn inside you. It's hard to explain this, Brother Remy. I think you know what I'm talking about. There was a time when that fire began to burn in your soul, and then you began to seek the source of that fire. Maybe that's a better way to say it than the presence. The source of that fire. You began to seek that. Then at the same time, without realizing, you're no longer as interested in the things of the world like you were. You got a passion. You're on a mission to do something. You can feel it in you. Anybody understand what I'm saying? Number 4, in verse 4. And when the Lord saw, boy, listen to this. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him. There's the call of God in Moses' life right there. But it didn't start there, did it? It didn't start there. It started with a fire beginning in your soul. It started with the seeking after the source of that fire. And then turning from things of this world, worldly pleasures, worldly things, whatever, beginning to turn from them things, wanting to get on a journey outside of those things. Number 4, when the Lord saw that, says here, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him. There's the call. Does everybody see that? We could stop right here. I got a couple more points, but do you see the call of God in this man's life? Do you see that everything about Moses is a perfect illustration of a New Testament call of God, a New Testament man of God, a New Testament pastor? Aaron, his assistant pastor. All right. When the Lord saw, my friend, God sees you. God knows your address, friend. God knows your phone number. God knows where you live. He knows where you work. He knows everything about you. God knows how to find you if he's wanting to call you to something. You don't have to write him a letter. You don't have to say, "Hey God, I'm here." He knows where you are. There's a process here, isn't there? Have you had that burning bush experience? Have you had a burning in your soul to do something for God? Now, I want to make very clear, the desire is wonderful. The desire is not the call. The desire to preach is not the call to preach. Not at all. Now, it's an important thing. I think it's in the progression here. And he first saw the fire. Then he wanted to get closer to the source of the fire. Then he began getting junk out of his life, and maybe stuff that's not junk, just things that to him were not important anymore because he's got his eyes set on something else. And God sees that you've responded to the fire, and you've responded to the God of the fire, and you've begun to turn away from what everybody else is into, and you're getting a passion for God, and then God sees it, and God calls. Starts with a fire. Now, I'm not saying you got to see a literal burning fire bush, because only one man that I know of has seen the burning fiery bush. But it's an illustration, isn't it? If you're called of God, I believe there's got to be some fire there somewhere. I believe there's got to be some passion there somewhere. Listen, you got to hold on to this. You got to have this in your life if you're going to make it in the ministry. You've got to know that you know that you know, not only that you're saved, but that you're called. God called me to this. Number 5, let me show you verse 5. Verse 5, of course, verse 4, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here am I." Now there is the acknowledgement of the person being called. "I believe you're calling me, Lord. Here I am." Now at that point, you may or may not need to talk to your pastor. Charles Spurgeon, in his book, Lectures to My Students, has a chapter in there on the call to preach. The greatest chapter in the whole book. I would encourage any preacher to read that chapter. And, he says, oftentimes your pastor will see the call of God in you before you yourself understand it. And so verse 5, and he said, "Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet." Now, there's some humility in the process, isn't there? You're not worthy, Moses, for this calling. Do you see that? Take your shoes off, son. You're on holy ground here. Your flesh. You're not worthy to be in the ministry. You're not worthy of the call of God upon your life that I'm about to give you, God says. Take your shoes off and realize you are flesh. You are nothing. You see that? By the way, do you know where the first usage of the word holy is in the entire Bible? Do you know the first time it's used in the Bible? We just read it. Because the ground that thou standest upon is holy ground. Wherever God is, it's holy. Whether it be inside the burning fiery furnace or up on a beautiful mountain or next to a beautiful stream or a lake or an ocean, where God is, it's holy. Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. I wrote this down, number 5. You begin to realize the holiness of God, especially when it comes to the place that you were at when you felt and understood this call of God upon your life. Now, let me say something here. I can't take you to the place anymore because the house I grew up in is no longer there. They tore it down, and they built another house there. But I can see it in my mind. I can see the very room where God saved me, and I've told you that story, and I shared that I think recently. Do you know what else I can see clearly in my mind? My call to preach. Now, it started with some preachers. But I remember the apartment. I remember for the first time feeling it in the apartment that I was living at in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine, right on the ocean. Boy, I don't think I realized what I had as a young man. You couldn't rent that place today. My goodness, you'd probably pay $2,000, $2,500 to rent that place a month. And I mean, right on the ocean. Beautiful, beautiful place. Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. I mean, tourist spot. I lived there for a year. And I remember I had some times in that apartment, and I began to realize God has called me. And I'm going to make some decisions there. I'm going to talk to the pastor, and I'm going to go to Bible college. I'm going to quit the shipyard job. I'm going to Bible college. I'm going to burn the plow, and I'm getting out of there. I'm going to college because God's called me. You know what kept me through Bible college? I had a call. I knew God had called me. And I had a dream about what I believed God wanted me to do. You begin to realize the holiness of God, especially in the place and time that God revealed himself to you and revealed that he had called you to something. And lastly, number 6, verse 7. Let me read verse 6. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. By the way, let me add this to number 5. There's some fear there. Don't worry about it. You're human. There's some fear. Faith is often mixed with doubt and fear. And we get in our pulpits and we get a bless God, we're going to do it. And we preach like, and we go to our study after church and we say, man, is God going to do it? Is he really going to, is it going to happen? Is God going to do what I preached about? And there's always some doubt and fear in the ministry. Don't let that make you think that you're not called. Everybody deals with that. Am I right, Brother Remy? He's pastoring in Illinois. Verse 7. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. Number 6 is this. You begin to feel and be burdened with the heart of God. You begin to get a burden and feel what God feels. That's what the ministry is, friend. That's what the ministry is. Now, I've been preaching pretty hard for several days now here about pastors. You know why? Because I want to help them. I want to help them. I think we're off track. I believe I'm doing what God called me to do. I'm an evangelist. I'm not a pastor anymore. I believe God has called me to a special task, a ministry to the churches and the preachers. And God's called me to prophecy, and this is prophecy. The reason churches are going into apostasy, which is prophecy, in the last days, until there be a falling away first. That's the great apostasy. I wrote a book on it, a little booklet. The end time apostasy. It's the falling away. It's people going away from the truth. It's churches going away from the truth. I know churches are made up of people. And who's the cause of it? I said this the other day. You remember, right? Pastors. I'm not saying that they started all, but the pastor's got to be there, and he's got to be the referee. He's got to be the umpire. He's got to be the policeman. He's got to stop the heresy that's coming into the church. That's the job of the shepherd, is to guard from the wolves and the thieves that want to come and grab the sheep. That's your job, pastor. If you don't do it, heresy and apostasy will creep in. And it's your fault, and you will give an account. I'm trying to help pastors. But as you go through this progression of the call to preach here, and I'm not saying it can't all happen in a day or so. I'm not saying that, but I think usually there's a progression. A fire gets lit, and you experience this fire, and then you want to know the God of the fire and the source of that fire, and then you begin to turn from things that don't matter, like sports. I mean, maybe some of your pastimes, they're not as important to you anymore. You've got a new passion. What's happening to you? Well, it could be that God's getting ready to call you to something. And then God sees that. And God calls you to the ministry. And you realize, you take your shoes off. You realize in humility, I'm not worthy of this. And by the way, if you think you're worthy to be in the ministry, you got problems, friend. There's nobody worthy to stand in the pulpit. Nobody. I don't care what preachers say about that. Where's the humility? Moses said, Lord, I can't speak. Who do you think you are, friend? When God called you, did you think you were D.L. Moody? Did you think you were John Wesley, Charles Spurgeon? did you think he called you because you were some great orator? Did I say that right? Brother Remy will call me out on that. Orator? A great speaker, I should. And where's the humility? Hey, preacher, take your shoes off, buddy. You're on holy ground. You're nothing. When you start to think you're somebody, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. So, God calls you. There'll be possibly some fear involved in this. And some humility and some awe. Wow. And you're going to, in this process, begin to feel the heart of God and want and begin to be burdened about what God is burdened about. Whether it be the lost souls of men or people who are struggling, depending on what God has called you to. And then, if it's ministry, if you're called to pastor or be an evangelist, something like that, your pastor and your church have to be involved in that. That's God's safety net. The laying on of hands comes when the church and the leadership of the church sees that calling in your life, and they lay hands on you and send you out into the ministry. And okay, that's a whole nother discussion that we're not going to get into here. All I'm trying to say is, preachers, where's your fire? Where's your fire? Where's your fire? Listen, you're driving down the street and you see a house on fire, people, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you see a flame coming out of a house. You pull over, what do? Do you go knock on the door? And, well, they're probably sleeping. I don't want to wake them up. What do you mean you don't want to wake them up? Hey, wake up! Kick the door in. Wake up! Anybody in the house? It's fire! That's what I'm talking about. Fire. Some intensity. Some passion. Souls are going to hell. Where's your passion, preacher? Young people in your church, or they don't care. They sit there and they're on their phone while you're preaching. Where's your passion? Listen, Spurgeon, I think it was Spurgeon once said, they asked him, what do you do if people sleep while you're preaching? He said, you wake up the preacher. Wake up the preacher. I mean, why are people not interested in what you're saying? Are you not interesting? Do you not have the power of God upon your life? We need a passion. We need fire. Fire. Moses stood before Pharaoh in Egypt, before the people. He said, let my people, God has said, let my people go. Preached. So, we need some passion. We need some fire. Hey, some of you pastors listening, did any of this click with your call to preach? Do you have a call to preach? Does any of this fit with your experience when you were a young man and you claim God called you? Does any of this at all bring back some memories? Okay, you say, yes, I'm definitely called to preach. Well, have you lost your fire? Have you lost your passion? Have you lost your way? Have you lost your direction? Have you lost your purpose in life? We're in the final days. What is it that Dan Goodman says all the time? Here we are at the end of all things. Do you believe that? Hey, pastor, do you believe that? Do you believe we're at the end of all things? Do you believe the Lord's coming any day now? We're out of here soon? Where's your passion? People are dying and going to hell. Your church is half dead. People are backslidden. Where's your fire? Here we are at the end of all things, and the pastor needs to be woke up. See, that's my calling. I'm an evangelist. My calling is to the churches and to the pastors of the churches. The pastor's job is to his flock. Both important jobs. And brother, we are in trouble. We are in trouble. Orator. Thank you, Brother Steve. Orator. What did I say? Did I say orator? I don't know what I said, and I'm not going to try it again. An orator. Thank you, Brother Steve. He's one of my proofreaders, by the way. He's tough. Brother Amy is tough. And, all right. Well, we've gone over again. We're 42 minutes. What can I say? All right, let's get off of here. Let me end with what I said. Preacher, quit trying to preach young men into the ministry. Quit preaching, trying to get them to come down the aisle and surrender to preach so everybody can clap for them. That's not how God calls people. Now, I'm not saying that there may be someone that's dealing with the call to preach, and that's fine. But be very careful about going after and encouraging someone to surrender to the ministry. I'm talking about the pastorate, evangelist, that kind of thing. I'm not talking about surrendering to go soul winning and that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the call of God to the ministry, pastoring, evangelist, those things. I hope I've been some help to everybody. And let's see, sometimes people fall asleep because they work a full-time job and they're run down and tired and the preaching of the Word of God. I understand there's times, but a lot of times people fall asleep because it's boring. And if it's boring, it may be the preacher's fault, right? Okay, I'm not saying that a guy can be up for 24 hours and he maybe is going to sleep during church no matter what's going on, right? I understand that. Praying for Chad. Ladybug says hello, and I think I got everything there. So, YouTube, God bless. This will be on YouTube, and you can watch this and the other ones. Remember, we are a viewer-supported ministry. We're on television, and it's a lot of money, and our ministry is here because of the support and the partnering of God's people. So keep that in mind. All right, God bless, and keep your eyes on them skies.